Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tawahungva. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. Leaders from the Bay Mills Indian community are banning the Enbridge pipeline from the Straits of Mackinac in Michigan. The tribe says Enbridge has weaponized its traditional culture as a way to influence issues around Line 5, and they believe the pipeline serves no benefit to them.
The Anishinaabe, we have a teaching, and that teaching reminds us that the decisions that we're making today should not only take into consideration the immediate concerns or the immediate profits of today, but instead we should be looking at how do we create a sustainable world, a sustainable future for the next 7 generations.
They say Line 5 has spilled 33 times since 1968, leaking more than 1.1 million gallons of oil. And those are just the documented spills, according to the tribe. In November, Governor Gretchen Whitmer ordered Enbridge to cease operations by May 12th. She revoked the easement it needs to operate. Enbridge maintains the state of Michigan does not have the authority to make such a request and has indicated it will not comply with the order. Support for the tribe is also coming from the city of Seattle. The city council sent a letter to the tribal chairman of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa, the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, and the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, saying the city recognizes the harmful impacts of the oil industry on Native American community lifestyle, health, and sovereignty. They went on to say the city supports the effort to halt construction of the tar sands Line 3 pipeline. The Biden administration is appointing a Muskogee Nation woman to be a U.S. district judge. Lauren King is the nominee for the Western District of Washington. President Fawn Sharp of the National Congress of American Indians issued this statement, quote, NCAI strongly supports the nomination of Lauren J. King, a citizen of the Muskogee Nation, as the first ever Native American judge to serve on a federal bench in Washington state. King is a principal at a law firm based in Seattle, where she has practiced since 2012. A process intended to avoid cultural miscues during graduation didn't help one family. Ayu Kasatalk did not consult school leaders prior to the graduation about the process to get permission for her son to wear traditional regalia. She says she didn't feel like she needed permission from a mostly non-Native administration. The family is Inupiaq. So when her son David showed up for graduation this week, he wore his beaded sealskin cap, but it was taken away before he walked across the stage. Ayu is very proud of her Indigenous culture, so when this incident happened, she says it felt like it marred the event for the family.
I was so incredibly upset and outraged and felt completely violated. And all that kept coursing through my mind was how incredibly unjust that act was.
She says it reminded her of family members who had their regalia burned when they were forced to attend boarding schools. Kasatalk met with the school superintendent the day after the graduation to voice her concerns. The superintendent told her the school district is going to change how the policy is enforced, and staff will begin Alaska Native-focused training. A new report from the Labor Department is showing higher prices for everything from food and clothing to housing. Inflation is striking the U.S. economy. In April, prices for goods and services surged by 0.8%. This is the largest monthly jump in more than a decade, with the year-over-year increase reaching its fastest rate since 2008. The inflation in prices, which has been building for months, is unsettling financial markets. And the jump also raises concerns that it could weaken the economic recovery from the pandemic recession. To read more about this, go to our website, indiancountrytoday.com, and search for the headline, Consumer Prices Shot Up 0.8% in April. Sesame Street is looking for puppeteers and performers who are Native American. They want to help develop and hone their on-camera puppeteer skills. And the workshop is part of Sesame Street's effort to advocate for diversity and recognize the importance of representation both on and off screen. Applicants must make a video no longer than 2 minutes with a puppet, and they must either sing a song or lip sync. For more information on how to apply, go to this website, sesameworkshop.org, and search for Native American. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Coming up next, following the effects of the pandemic on Indian Country.
We'll talk to the chairman of the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Indians and see how the tribe is faring in this global health crisis. For the past year, we've been asking tribal leaders about how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted their people and economies. We've heard many stories, some familiar and some unique to each tribe. Joining us today is Mark Macarro. He's the chairman of the Pechanga Band of Luiseno Indians in Southern California. Welcome, Chairman Macarro.
Good morning. Thank you, Mark.
I'll start with an overview of how the pandemic has impacted your community.
Well, first, our hearts go out to all our fellow Indian people from all over Indian country. I think every nation appears to have been touched by the pandemic, and so our hearts go out to them for all our lost loved ones during this pandemic period. Just like everywhere else, I think the pandemic has certainly had its impact in Southern California and even with our tribe. I also want to tie this into something historical because for our people, this is probably the third pandemic that I think we have dealt with since the late 1700s. Certainly the first was with Father Sarah and the onset of the missions and when he created the mission system in Southern California, and the one that impacted my tribe the most. We didn't have immunity to what they brought, and suffered probably a 90% population loss at that point in time. So, the thought of, I can tell you the thought of a pandemic rearing its head over a year ago, such as it did, was certainly a frightening prospect. But, the second time was the influenza of 1918, which also affected our people tremendously and in a very rapid way. So, the spacing is just long enough for everybody to almost forget that these things have happened, unfortunately. And so I will say that our community, without going into any numbers or anything, our community has certainly felt the direct impact of COVID. It's been sudden, it's been tragic, and it's been something that I think we've all pulled together around and try to find new and safer ways of doing things as well.
How does it look for vaccine distribution?
Well, in our case, I think the Indian Health Service has done a good job of creating a flow of vaccine into California beginning in late January or so. And what they've done is they've maintained, I think, a consistent and steady supply of vaccine. And so, as we turn around and look at how that unfolded in California, remarkably, I think IHS was ahead of where the rest of the state was and non-Indian country in California, certainly, and where we are here in Southern California. So in terms of vaccination in my tribe, we are close to about 50%. We weekly assess our numbers. We have tribal members that live on and near our reservation, and then it gets harder to pulse check further out in other states where our membership lives. However, the numbers that we do have show us that we're sitting at about 50% vaccination. We expect those numbers to go up in over the next probably month as they've lowered the age, I think, for the Pfizer vaccine, so that teens can get the vaccinations.
Of course, none of us live in isolation. What does it look like for your neighbors? You mentioned you're ahead of them, but are you getting enough to feel like there's some safety in that?
Generally, yes. You know, that's been one of the what you just said right now. I think I usually repeat out to our fellow tribal leadership when we're having these discussions, is that no tribe is an island. And so as our local community goes, as our region goes, so do we. And so in that context, you know, we've certainly tried to do as much as possible to create those margins of safety, and literally vaccination margins, and then lead by example with our businesses, and then show how we can do things safely and still, you know, be open. I think all the rates of COVID spread locally in the Temecula Valley and regionally in Southern California are certainly down. And even in the state, the governor here is talking about ending the mask mandate in mid-June. So
we see across really the world how tourism and entertainment really got hit hard by this pandemic, probably harder than any other single industry, and that directly impacts you. I'm wondering about how it looks from an economic view, and I know that's kind of dismissal of some things, but it's also an important consideration.
Well, in Indian country, it certainly is to tribes that are fortunate in locations that are able to have economic enterprises like a gaming facility or anything else. And so, you know, COVID doesn't discriminate in the types of businesses that it impacts, whether it's entertainment or something else. So the impact has obviously been huge. You know, now I'll just give you one stat. The American Gaming Association recently reported that gaming in the U.S., COVID had a devastating impact of over a 31% decrease in revenue generation, and that's a really large decrease or impact. And for comparison, during the recession, you know, over a decade and a half ago or so, relatively mild impacts there, about 8.4% by comparison. So COVID really economically hit hard. I mean, we're talking about revenue generation, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of jobs. People have been furloughed and laid off. So as we roll out of the pandemic over the next 12 months or so, hopefully things will stabilize more. But you know, in our case, we are looking at about a 50% reduction in everything. You know, that our gaming, our rooms, everything has been at about 50%.
I'm curious, and I don't need the particulars, but I'm just curious on the big picture on how a tribal government and tribal leader is going to navigate the American Rescue Plan and how to spend money both in a way that's effective and filling the stopgap for so many of these issues.
Well, we are too. Well, let me start by saying that the American Rescue Plan, first of all, historically and monumentally significant. What is being funded in Indian country certainly appears almost without precedent, and I know we're truly grateful for the opportunity to help fix some things that the pandemic maybe created, and help make things safer for our communities rolling forward, and remedy things that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So we're beginning to take a look and examine what those things are going to be, and we want to, you know, certainly make the best of the circumstance. I've been a tribal leader for over 25 years, and this is in that time frame. This is the first time that there's been such a substantial funding of an effort in Indian country by Congress.
This is really an opportunity for tribal governments to show what they have.
Absolutely. So more on that later.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I'm really intrigued by the nature of work. And we've seen in the past year either hybrid offices or people working at home. We're now seeing people go back into some limited workforce places, but it's going to be different. How do you think it's going to look for tribal government?
Well, I think I can speak certainly from our experience here. I can tell you that the digital workspace, the teleworking, as I think the term is evolving, and Zoom meetings, hybrid gatherings where some people are Zooming and some people are there in person. I think that's going to continue for us. There are varying levels of comfort and squeamishness in terms of gathering in large groups still amongst a lot of the folks in my daily sphere. And so I think everything from our council meetings to our general tribal membership meetings, which can bring in a few hundred people, we're still working our way to finding the best interim way of accomplishing those kinds of things. I mean, we need to meet, as tribes. There's so much is done in a collective decision-making environment, and so that's the given. How we do that safest and most efficiently has been the challenge. During the depths of the pandemic, we had a handful of, well, actually it's less than a handful, but we had a few general membership meetings that were drive-in meetings. We had a parking lot available to us, a big parking lot. We spaced cars out like drive-in style, so everybody's facing the stage, and the council got up on the stage, but we Zoomed the meeting to the cars. So it wasn't on a PA. In order to participate in the meeting, you had to be present. That is one of our rules. And you had to, log into your mobile device. Most people, that was a cell phone. Some had laptops or iPads, I guess. And we conducted our meeting. And then to vote, people had to get out of their cars, or somebody drove by in a little golf cart and picked up a ballot. And then we had a camera on the voting box so people could see ballots go in. And so, it was a workaround. But I think we're planning our first meeting right now to go indoors in probably one of our biggest our venues, actually, at our casino, which is something we don't normally do, but as an interim measure, we're looking to have that first meeting indoors in a big space.
We only have about 20 seconds, but I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about the year ahead?
I think everything needs to be steady as we move ahead. I wouldn't look for anything too different from what we're doing now. We're slowly going to be opening up later this month more of our gaming facility, more guests, and a tower that's been closed for a whole year, over a year. So ratcheting up our capacity for guests and the level of business. So it'll look more normal. It won't quite be normal. And I think we're a good year away from that point in normalcy, whatever that's going to be.
Chairman Mark Macarro, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mark.
When we come back, the Navajo Nation bumps the Cherokee Nation out of first place, at least when it comes to tribal enrollment numbers. We'll tell you how the pandemic played a role in this change. The coronavirus created several issues for tribes, such as putting people on lockdown and closing tribal businesses and services. Perhaps one unexpected outcome of the pandemic is the increase in tribal enrollment. Kalle Benallie joins us now to talk about how COVID-19 helped increase the population, at least it's counted, on the Navajo Nation. Welcome, Kalle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What factors were at play in having the Navajo Nation with, first tell us about the percentage increase. It's pretty a big jump.
Yes, it's a 30.4% increase.
And how did that happen?
Well, the tribe did their own tribal enrollment and for the CARES Act, and so they had over 300,000 records that they collected, and they digitized them, collected them, because some of the older ways of recording them were outdated, and so they really updated a lot, and they received about over 293,000 applications for the hardship program.
So in a way, it's not a change in population as much as better counting.
Yeah, so they really updated their methods and have surpassed the Cherokee Nation in having the largest tribal enrollment.
And Navajo Nation, unlike a lot of tribes, instead of having a central collection of enrollment, each chapter is kind of responsible for collecting that initial data anyway. And that probably complicated this all throughout the process.
The Navajo Nation has one of the largest reservations in the country. And so they have many different areas to collect all this data.
So what were the Navajo and the Cherokee leaders telling you about this?
Well, the Cherokee Nation just congratulated the Navajo Nation on their increase in population. They said they're just really excited to see these numbers, and it's just to show that there are natives in the United States.
And how about the Navajo Nation?
The Office of Controller was just, Perline Kirk just said that she was really excited to see these numbers and to finally validate all of these certificates of Indian blood and really get a more accurate number of the Navajo Nation.
One kind of interesting twist on this is that for years people have said that the census is suspect because it's self-identification. Yet in a way, this validates the census because the census has said for a long time that Navajo Nation was the largest tribe. And Cherokee said, no, our enrollment numbers are bigger. And this kind of turns that whole thing on its head.
Yes, there's different ways that a lot of tribes, Alaska Natives and Native Americans get counted. The US Census is done every 10 years. And then they have the American Survey, I believe.
American Community Survey.
American Community Survey, and that's done every year, but then that has a lot of different questions and doesn't really focus on race or ethnicity. And concerning this, tribal enrollment is done by the tribes, so their numbers reflect a little more accurately.
The way you count a tribe actually has huge implications because now the tribes will be able to use those numbers to get their share of Rescue Act money.
Yeah. So can you repeat the question?
Oh, that the way they count and how that gets to that impacts how much money they'll get under the American Rescue Plan. So it directly impacts the tribal government in that sense.
Yes, it does. A lot of people that I talked to mentioned just hopefully that these numbers will reflect in the programs and services that the tribes can provide, because it gives the government a more accurate or just a number to depend on how much money that tribe needs.
And then to figure out, is there any way that that translates into how they'll spend the money? Because in the case of Cherokee Nation, there's a very small geography, but in Navajo Nation's case, it's a very large geography.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would want to spend that money. Right now, I think a lot, the Navajo Nation is really concerned about COVID response and just addressing that issue.
Trying to get there. What else are you working on, Kalle?
I'm working on the Kewa Pueblo story that 160 homes, they're planning on rebuilding 160 homes in their village in New Mexico. And then also just the regular obituaries from our Portraits from the Pandemic series.
Yeah, that's been a remarkable series, and if viewers haven't seen it, I would encourage them to search for your byline and that Portraits of the Pandemic. Is that really a hard thing to do, to write those stories?
Yes, I try to approach it by just learning more about the person and getting the stories behind these statistics. We haven't encountered a global pandemic in a very long time, and there was never really any documentation about who these people are and who these Native lives are. And so we're just trying to highlight that these were people and the effects that it has on them and their family.
Well, and what's so extraordinary is it's not just famous people, but people who are going about their daily lives. And I think that's where you've really done a great job, Kalle.
Thank you.
Maybe just talk about one of the ones that comes to mind.
I've done so many. Probably, I'll go with the recent one, Robert B. Gay. He was heavily involved in the judicial system for the Native American tribes in the United States. And he, just from what I talked to with his daughter, he was a very involved dad, and he was very encouraging, and he was basically like her best friend. So it was really interesting to hear that.
Thank you, Kalle Benallie.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. We will be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. Standing
This is Indian Country Today.